So my name is Tom Cermak. I'm an IICRC instructor. I teach carpet, upholstery, odor, color, and carpet repair. I've been doing this 45 years. So I have a little bit of background, and I have probably a different approach than some of the other people here. I'm a chicken, okay? I always try to be the least aggressive. You know, the speaker before me was talking about being chemically conscious and balancing, and that is really important. He said he doesn't like to use air movers to dry. Well, that's great. If you're doing upholstery and you're not using air movers to dry, especially if it's a natural fiber, you are creating situations you don't want. So I've learned, you know how I learned? Just like Robert before me, because we've made those mistakes. I have done furniture that turned brown, that had watermarks. I've had color bleed. I have had stuff that was not good happen in my processes, and unfortunately I had to learn from the school of hard knocks. We didn't even have classes in a lot of this back then. So it was a trial and error kind of thing. And that's why I'm a chicken now, because I found that if I go in the least aggressive method, I can be a lot safer. And one of the biggest things we learn about upholstery, especially, you know, there's a lot of synthetic out there, don't get me wrong, but that's not where we get into trouble. Where we get into trouble is natural fibers, okay? There's a couple things we have to worry about. First, we have to worry about crocking. Now, crocking is where there's color loss from mechanical agitation, okay? Whether it's wet or dry, that towel, if you go like this and it's losing color, that's called crocking. Now, if you just put your pre-spray on, you missed a pre-spray on, and the color starts running with no mechanical agitation, that's bleeding. So color problems are crocking and bleeding. The higher pH you go, the more water you put down, there are a number of things that make it worse. The first thing you need to do is find out what you've got. So we do fiber ID tests, okay? Everybody should be doing fiber ID tests on their product. So you find out if it's a synthetic fiber, you find out if it's a natural fiber. That's the first thing, is it synthetic or natural? Or wait, it could be a blend. And we can get into the whole fiber ID testing. If you don't understand fiber ID testing, you really need to, there are fiber ID charts online, there's fiber ID everywhere, but I'm gonna break it down very simply. Synthetics usually burn to a really hard, crispy ash. Natural fibers burn to a soft ash. Now, where you get in trouble is where you have something that's partially synthetic and partially natural. And what'll happen is it'll melt and you won't realize that it's got a natural fiber to it. Or you'll see you'll have multiple colors on a fabric and you'll grab the blue one and you'll do a burn test or a fiber ID test, but you didn't test every single color in that pattern. That's a big area of risk. If you have let's say a floral pattern on a piece of furniture and it's got 5 colors, you don't just test one color, because it may be 3 or 4 of those fibers may be synthetic or natural, and 1 or 2 might be vice versa. So you need to find out what the fiber is, each individual one, determine if it's natural or synthetic, because we're going to treat them differently. Synthetic is most of them, let's use a polyester as an example, microfiber. We're very common. You can hit microfiber with pretty aggressive chemistry without any side effects. If you do the same thing to cotton, you might own it. You might get to take it home for your spouse and tell them how you paid top dollar for it, and they get the ruined piece. So I'm really important that you do a fiber ID test. As soon as you determine the fiber, you're going to do a color fastness test. You're going to do the mechanical agitation and see if it crocks, transfers onto a white towel. Then you're going to do a color fastness test for bleed. Now, how that is, you take your most aggressive chemical, usually your alkaline, you apply it to a white cotton towel. You take the white cotton towel, you unzip the cushion if you can and get to where there's the fold of fabric. You clip it on and you let it sit for 10 minutes. It takes about 10 minutes to see if it's really going to bleed. Technically, they tell you should wait till it dries. But most of the time, if it's going to bleed, that bleeding is going to happen in 10 minutes or less. So if you pull it up and you see a bleed, that's a danger Will Robinson. Now, I like to carry an entire upholstery kit where I carry an acid, a neutral, and an alkaline. And if I think there might be a problem, I might take and put 3 areas on that white cotton towel in 3 clips. So So I'm testing all 3 chemicals at once for that 10 minutes. Because once I've determined that I'm going to clean that fabric, Mrs. Smith doesn't determine how I clean it. We just discuss a price. Mrs. Smith, I'm going to do this, it's this much. Then I'm determining the chemistry. So I'll do my test. Now, while that test is happening, it takes 10 minutes. You can play Angry Bird on your phone, you can twiddle your thumbs, or you can set up all your equipment, you can stage your moving pads, you can actually start your vacuuming process, because we know every process in cleaning starts with dry soil removal. So I've done my burn test, I've done my crocking test, my color fastness test. Now that's going to take 10 minutes from that point where I put those on. Now I'm going to do my dry soil removal, and I'm going to then stage my whole area. By that time, I should be able to pull that white cotton towel up with my 3 chemicals and say, okay, it did bleed with an alkaline, it didn't. It did bleed with an acid, it didn't. And whichever one that I see that I'm not having to bleed with, I might have no bleed with any of them. I might have it bleed with all 3, and there might be a problem. But KleenRite here actually makes the only dry fabric cleaner machine that I know of in the country for using dry solvents. So if you find it bleeds with acids, neutrals, and alkalines, you might have to go to a dry solvent clean and test that. But in general, you're going to find which one works and you're not seeing bleed with, and that's what you're going to proceed with. So I've already done everything to determine what I need to do to clean. Now I've determined the chemistry. Now the next part is the application of that chemistry. I'm going to tell you that most fabric, and if you take every couch and every chair that you're going to run into, most fabrics are less than the thickness of 2, 3, 4 business cards. That's how thick the fabric is. That's a super thick fabric. Most of the textiles we deal with are about that thick. Do we need to use a hydroforce at 500 psi to spray that couch or that chair down? No. If we do, we're using way, way, way too much product. We're soaking the cushion and everything else. We're creating all kinds of problems with bleeding, because if it doesn't bleed immediately in the last 15 minutes of the drying cycle, which could be 2 days later if you soak it with a hydroforce, that's when you're going to have color problems. So the first thing we have to discuss is we've determined what we're going to use. Now, how are we going to apply it? Never, ever, ever am I using a hydroforce on any natural fiber. Now, I'm not going to say if I go to a church and they have 500 chairs and it's all synthetic, that you couldn't turn the pressure down and maybe get away with a hydroforce, but I don't ever recommend it. I'm using an electric sprayer with the right tip for the fabric, and there are different tips. Most people don't realize there are different volumes of water you put out. Your spray tips have 2 different sets of numbers. The first number is the angle of the spray pattern. It's a 50, it's a 65, it's an 80, it's a 90, it's a 110. That's the degree of the spray pattern. The second number, the 0050 or the 001 or 002, is the diameter of the hole in millimeters. That's how big a hole, so that's how much water you're putting out. So the first one is the angle, the second is the volume of water you're putting out. If you're doing upholstery and you know you're not supposed to be using the 04 or 06 from your hydroforce, most of the time we're going to be using an 01 or an 02, and if we're getting into natural fibers, there are many times I use an 00050, which is a half of 1. I'm putting a light mist on. I don't need to soak the fabric. I need to break the surface tension, penetrate into the fiber, and separate the soils and oils from the fabric. So my thing is, I'm going to put a light mist on. I'm going to agitate it with my horsehair brush. I'm going to give it the 5 minutes of dwell time that most pre-sprays say you should have, and then I'm going to extract, rinse it out. If I'm using a synthetic fiber, if I'm doing olefin or polyesters, microfibers, I might use a slightly alkaline. If I'm doing a natural fiber, I'm going to tell you right now, I am never ever using an alkaline on natural fibers. I'm going to use something that's mildly acidic. And the reason is, natural fibers, most of what we deal with is cotton, rayon, which is basically cellulosic material treated with high alkalines to make a man-made type product. But most of what we deal with has cellulose in it. It's cottons, okay? Whether it's a cotton, a linen, a jute, any of these natural fibers have lignin. We've all seen browning, watermarking. Well, when you see browning, that's the cellulosic binder wicking to the surface of the fiber. What causes that to happen? High pH will cause it to wick more. High pH will cause it to turn darker brown. If you have a very light pH, like a 7.5 or an 8, your browning is going to be a light color brown. If you're using your 10 or 11 carpet nuclear pre-sprays or worse, it's going to be a dark brown. Watermarking, that can be lignin, it can be soils, it can be minerals and everything that's wicking out during the drying process. So there's a difference between browning and watermarking, but sometimes what we call watermarking is watermarking and browning together. So it'll have that ring, and that's where the water wicks to the outside, and the last place it dries where it leaves those deposits. Now that can be minerals, especially if you live in areas with a high mineral content. That can be too much detergents left in because you didn't flush it properly, you overused the pre-spray, and it could be lignin that's wicking out as well. So if you want to minimize that, you need to be on the acid side because you're not going to see near as much lignin and browning issues. Also, it dries faster, evaporates quicker, you're going to have less water marking. So if you control the moisture, you control the pH, you put less pre-spray down, agitate, and use an acid rinse, you're going to have a lot less problems. Now, Robert was up here and he said he dries within an hour, and I'm sure in this climate he probably does, and he doesn't use air movers. I'm going to tell you, if you're cleaning a natural fiber, whether it's a linen, a cotton, whatever, and you're not using air movers, you're missing the boat. You're creating problems because bleeding happens either when we hit the product immediately with a high pH or in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the drying cycle because the chemical works over time at breaking up those dyes. If we dry it extremely fast, it doesn't have a chance to wick. If we dry it extremely fast, it doesn't have a chance to watermark. If we dry it extremely fast and we're using an acid, it doesn't have a chance to brown. So why would you not use air movers? I know companies that have 200 air movers in their building and they send trucks out every day to clean upholstery and they don't use air movers. There's not an air mover on the truck. Wrong. You should be using at least 2 air movers. One for the worst areas, and I like to start with the worst first because then it can wick, and if I need to hit it a second time I can. And then one to follow myself around. So if I'm going to do a couch, and I'm going to use this and say this is my couch, and the worst areas on the couch are what? Usually the seat and the arms, right? Would you agree that's correct? So the first thing I'm going to precondition, the first thing I'm going to agitate, and the first thing I'm going to do my first rinse on is the seat and the arms. Whichever is worst, I'm going to do first. Then I'm going to have my table sitting here blowing air movement, not into the table, but across the table to aid in evaporation, okay? Then I'm going to do the body, the outside areas that are usually very lightly soiled. And when I do this panel, this side of the couch, I'm going to set the air mover here. When I finish the back, 5 minutes later, this has had 5 minutes of good airflow. It's going to be a lot less moist, usually almost dry in 5 to 10 minutes with a good air mover. Then I'm going to put the air mover on the back when I finish that. When I finish this side and maybe the front skirts, I'm going to move the air mover around. Then I'm going to look at the seats and I'm going to look at the arms and I'm going to say, how does this look? Am I happy? If I'm not, those seats and arms have had 15 or 20 minutes. All the wicking that's going to happen is going to happen by then. So if I need to readdress this arm, let's say it's a linen, when we get linen wet, it turns darker. Sometimes we can't even see the spots didn't come out. So if I have that air movement on it and it's 15, 20 minutes, I've done the rest of the couch, I can say, okay, I need to readdress this area. So I'm going to do these arms again, I'm not happy. And maybe this cushion, there's some spots that didn't come out. So I can readdress those, put both air movers on those now because I've dried off the entire piece. Then I can wrap up, do my customer walkthrough and everything else. By the time I'm done, I can have it dry to the touch before I leave the customer's home. If I have it dry to the touch, I'm not going to have any wicking issues when I'm done. I'm not going to have any browning. It's not going to bleed because there's not enough moisture to be a catalyst to carry that lignin, to carry those minerals, to carry anything. So I know in carpet, a lot of people don't use air movement. In upholstery, if you are doing natural fibers and you are not using air movement, you are taking a big risk because you can have the browning, the watermarking, the bleeding, and all these things happen, let alone shrinkage and the whole 9 yards, that can be so easily avoided with a couple of air movers. The air movers, once you buy them, You paid for them, they're going to last usually for years unless you're like really abusive of your equipment, using the customer's electricity. So the only thing it costs you is the energy to bring those air movers in and the energy to carry them back out to your truck. That's what it costs you. What does it save you? Buying furniture, having really mad customers, okay? People ask two things: how much and how long till it's going to be dry? If your couch is wet for a day and you can't sit on it, by the end of that day, you're thinking, boy, that guy didn't do that great a job. It's still wet. If I leave and it's almost dry, it's dry to the touch already, and you have the customer reach down and feel it, they're like, wow. You think they're going to talk about you in a positive way or a negative way? How much? Price is negotiable based on the level of service, what type of fiber, what type of problems you have. Like the guy before me said, he's a problem solver. Well, Robert is a problem solver, so am I. You've got Kool-Aid on that sofa, I'm going to take it out. You've got an ink, your child spit up amoxicillin, you know that bubblegum flavored antibiotic? That stuff will dye concrete. So I'm going to use my reducing agent on that, okay? I'm going to rinse it when I'm done, but I'm going to use a reducing agent. I'm going to take all that out. I'm the problem solver, but is it a $50 couch? No. I don't even touch a synthetic couch for under $150. We get into natural fibers, it's more. I like to charge by the linear foot. And the reason I do that is I think it's more fair. You know, natural fibers start at $32.50 and go to $42.50 a linear foot. Synthetic start at $20 a linear foot, so a 7-foot couch is $140. Now your market may be different than mine in Atlanta, and I'm not telling you what you have to charge, but I'm telling you if you're not making a profit and you're not doing that $100 to $150 in an hour at a minimum, you're shortchanging yourself. And to say my customer won't pay for it, my answer is find a better customer, okay? The reality is, if they're price shopping and they want me to clean that sofa for $25, well, you know, it's less fabric than this entire room. Yeah, but it takes way longer than the entire room to clean. So I'm going to charge accordingly for it, but I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to properly precondition. It takes a little longer to use a small electric pump up or a hand pump or whatever and apply preconditioner, groom it in, and clean it properly than it does to hit it with a hydroforce, suck it up and run, okay? It takes longer. I get paid for that time. Using the right chemistry. If you're using your carpet cleaning chemicals on upholstery, get out of town. You don't belong here. You don't belong listening to me. I don't like you. You really shouldn't be doing this. People don't realize chemistry for upholstery, especially natural fiber, is so much different than a synthetic fiber. But use and buy the right products. Use them according to the manufacturer's directions. Robert was absolutely correct. Too much chemical can actually cause diminishing returns. I teach in my class. If I have a bottle, if this is a water molecule, let's think about this for a minute, and I have this much mineral in my water, my city water, and I put this much chemical in, I only have this much room left to carry away soils, okay? And now if I vacuum really well and remove a lot of the particulates, I use a water filtration or water softener, and I have this much mineral and I use this much chemical, I have all this amount to carry away soils. I'm going to actually work less, do less passes, and get a better quality. So use the products that are made for what we're doing, because the detergents and surfactants and everything made for most of the upholstery chemicals are different than carpet cleaning chemicals. People don't think of all these things. I clean for a living, I correct. I have hundreds of pictures of damaged furniture. I mean, so badly browned that it's just horrific. I mean, it's almost as dark as this. I mean, it's amazing how much lignin can wick when someone uses a high pH carpet cleaning chemical on a minimally processed cotton. They have to pay me they charged $125 to clean the couch. They got to pay me $400 to correct it, but it's better than paying $2,500 to replace it, okay? And if you think, well, I've got insurance, well, if you've got basic, business insurance, that insurance, unless you have a workmanship guarantee type insurance, does not cover poor workmanship. If you accidentally kick the gear shift and your truck drives into their house, it's covered. If you accidentally overwet or brown or bleed out their couch, that's not covered. And then you have a $5,000 deductible. Well, how many couches cost $5,000? Now there are quite a few. I just cleaned a silk that was $26,000 on sale. Okay, I have one. I've got pictures of my partner and I cleaning. It's a minimally processed couch. They have pictures of the artist rendering before they made that specialty piece. It was $10,000 for that sofa. But it doesn't matter what it costs. It's coming out of my pocket because my insurance isn't paying for that. So you really need to look at what you're doing and price it according to the risk and the time it's going to take, and go ahead and spend the extra time. When you're using these tools, now most of these that we're using today, these KleenRites, are low pressure tools, 40 PSI to 100 PSI. So they're using an external jet, because if they use an internal jet, the vacuum will actually overpower the water. So they have to use an external jet. But if you knew how to use the tool properly, many people want to go, you cannot do that. If you want to get a proper extraction, you need to slow down. Many times, if it's not a stretchable fabric like silk, you will actually lift up on the vacuum tool a little bit. It'll do what they call doming the fabric, where the fabric actually lifts up. Let me do this. Hold on. Where the fabric, because of the vacuum, actually lifts up off the cushion. When it does that, my airflow is now going through that super thin fabric and pulling way more water out. So you should not be pushing down and doing, you should be slightly lifting with the vacuum and pulling and extracting. And I love these clear heads. I think this is one of the greatest innovations in the upholstery cleaning business. And I don't care what brand you use. When I have a metal head, can I see how much water is coming through there? No. When I have a clear head, I can see how much moisture. Do I need to do an extra vacuum pass that's still pulling out a lot of water? Am I pulling out a white foam so I haven't rinsed it well enough? Am I pulling out a brown foam? Uh-oh, I haven't cleaned it well enough. So I love these clear heads, okay? Use them. Don't be in a hurry. Charge a little more for your upholstery. Use the right chemistry. Use air movers. And use this clear head to your advantage. Now, there are a lot of them that are silver, and everybody likes, they're more durable. I mean, a stainless steel head is more durable than this plastic. It's also heavier. You also can't see what you're doing. I'll tell you what, I will take a clear-headed tool, my personal opinion, over anything else out there. And I don't care what brand, internal, external. I care about being able to see how much moisture I'm extracting. If it's coming out soapy, I haven't rinsed it enough. If I'm doing these dry extraction passes and I'm seeing brown water coming out, have I cleaned it and flushed it significantly? Have I done a good job? No, that water should be completely clear that's coming through this tool. It should have no foam, no soap, and no soil. If I've got that and then I'm drawing and I'm seeing I'm getting almost nothing out, do I need to do 6 more vacuum passes if I've removed the water? No, I don't, so I know when to stop. So these clear heads really give us a great indication of what we've done, how successful we've been, and if we need to go further. So that's why I like clear heads. Any questions on anything I've talked about so far?
If you nick the head, what do you do to...
If I nick this head, like put a plastic nick in it? Well, I mean, there are epoxies you can use. You could sand the nick out because, you know, prettiness is not as important as not having a sharp edge. You can actually take epoxy fillers for most of these, the 2-part epoxies, and just fill a little nick in, let it dry, and then sand it and make sure it's smooth. So, and to be honest with you, most of these plasticized tools are pretty inexpensive, but if I had to, I could buy just this head or the head and the shaft and put a new assembly on it. I don't know if KleenRite sells them like that. I'm not big into the every brand of what they sell. I have several different clear-headed tools. I'll tell you right now, to me, this is disposable, okay? If it's this or a $2,500 couch, let's say I've got have you guys ever seen a satin weave where they have floating fibers? You'll have a flower and you'll see the yarn goes across 3 or more of the wefts. That's a satin weave, okay? I pull one strand with a nick tool, I've damaged that sofa almost irreparably, and those are usually very expensive sofas. So would I want to replace a $2,500 sofa, a $4,000 sofa, or a $65 plastic head that I can get to put the new put the same trigger assembly on just the head? Most of these places will sell you just a plastic assembly. So am I going to spend $65, $75, or am I going to spend $2,500? I'm really into maintenance of my equipment. I've learned to buy the best equipment and take care of it. You know, there's a lot of these tools you can buy, the plastic or like duffel bags that you coil it up in and you put it in your truck inside those bags to protect that from happening. I don't just take my equipment and throw it in the back of my truck. I put it in, I actually have, it's like a backpack that I use for mine, okay? And I put it inside that backpack. It fits perfectly, doesn't tighten the coils too much, and it keeps me from damaging my tools. You know, when I use my equipment, do I flush out my equipment every day? You better believe I do. Okay, if you've got a heating system in this, you need to be flushing it out every day. And actually, many of the manufacturers make an acidic rinse if you're not using softened or filtered water. Tell you something else, everybody, you see how the this machine has quick connects your high pressure line hooks too. You know you can buy a filter that connects between here and there. You know where your water comes in, you can buy a filter. You know if you're filling up a kitchen sink and you're pouring buckets in, you can put a filter in line between the sink and your outcoming water so the buckets you're filling have filtered water. The cleaner your water, the cleaner your process, the less chemical you use, the less residue. There are all kinds of things. The more you get into this and the more you start looking at ways you can tweak your process to be the best. So you do your testings. So we did our fiber ID test. We tested for crocking and bleeding. You determined what you were going to use as a cleaning product, your cleaning chemical, by your color fastness test. You can control your water. You can control everything and really make it an amazing process that sets you apart from all your competition.
Good point on the different fabrics. What if you find you have a natural and a synthetic? Tell us how you would treat that.
You always treat, if you have a natural and a synthetic or any blend, if it's got anything natural, you're going to treat it as that natural. Because if you treat it as a synthetic, you're going to have a problem. If you treat it as a natural, natural is just going to be more acidic and it's going to be a less aggressive chemical. It'll still clean a synthetic fiber, but it won't hurt the natural. So you always treat it like the least powerful. You know, they say the weakest point of a chain, the weakest link is what you got to be worried with. Well, it's the same with upholstery. If you know you have a natural fiber and a synthetic, and you know synthetic you can use almost anything on, but it's got some natural, you can't use that. You've got to use what you're going to use for the weakest link. I'm a chicken carpet cleaner. I'm a chicken upholstery cleaner. I use the least aggressive method. You know, Robert was talking about a shotgun type approach. I look at it this way. If I have a fly swatter, I kill flies with it. I don't pull out my Glock and start shooting at the fly. Okay, that's not the way to do it. I'm going to get my fly swatter out and be minimally aggressive. Now, if it's a grizzly bear, I'm going to hope that I have my 30-06 or something really powerful because I don't want to get eaten. I always load for bear, load all my chemistry, my equipment, everything. I load for bear and pray for mice. Okay, in my preparation, in my job, I start with treating for mice and only go to bear if I find that it's not working. So I try to be minimally aggressive. I try to take everything I could possibly need to the job because I hate going back. I hate having, oh, I should have brought this, I should have brought that, shoulda, coulda, woulda. If frogs had wings, they wouldn't bump their butt when they jumped, right? I don't want to, I shoulda. I want to have the right chemistry. I don't go to a job and not have my natural fiber cleaner, my acid rinses, my reducers. I go loaded for bear, everything I might possibly need because I don't know what the customer has. And a lot of times they tell you, but sometimes they're mistaken or misinformed. I have people tell me, oh, I have a silk rug. I get there, it's art silk, viscose rayon, right? Totally different thing. So, you know, customers can be right, but customers can be wrong. I'm the professional. So I'm going to be prepared to do whatever it takes to do the job. And I'm going to start with the least aggressive. If I don't think that I need a nuclear pH of not only 13, but even 10 on upholstery is high. If I don't need that, I'm not going to use it. I'm going to start as mild as possible, as least aggressive. I like to use horsehair brushes to brush all my pre-sprays into upholstery. I know guys that grab nylon bristle brushes, really aggressive brushes, and start brushing really delicate fibers and do damage, irreparable damage. Okay, I know guys that they'll take, and I've got a spot. I've got little Timmy spilled some spaghetti sauce on the couch. So they grab their white cotton towel and they put some spotter on it. Let's hope they don't pour the spotter directly on the fabric. They actually put it on the towel, and then they do this. And when they're done, they got the spot up, but the nap is all distorted. What do? I'm a little different. There's this magical brush, it's called a tamping brush. I will put the spotter on my towel so I'm not saturating the fabric. I will put it on there and use my tamping brush to break up and suspend those soils so I can remove them so I don't distort the fabric, because that distortion is permanent. So everything I do is geared towards being as minimally aggressive as possible, using my equipment properly, taking my time, keeping my equipment clean and maintained. People treat their equipment horribly a lot of times on these trucks. I teach a lot of distributors, and I look in the trucks and I'm like horrified. And then I go into some and everything is neat and clean and organized, and I'm like, yeah, I like this guy. Because you know what? Your equipment's going to last longer if you take care of it. If you strap it in so it's not falling, rolling, slamming into your shelves, falling over on its side because you strapped it in properly, are you going to have as many problems? Oh, I bought this machine, it's junk. Well, you roll down the road, you're cutting 90s, and the thing's slamming around in the back of your truck, and you're blaming the equipment for the failure. It's not the equipment, it's the operator, okay? If you take care of your equipment, it'll take care of you. If you take care of your furniture tool, putting it in that bag, that was a great thing on the Nick. Put it in the bag, put it in a duffel bag, do something to take care of it. My buddy Scott, he always put his furniture tool on the passenger seat and would actually buckle it in so it wouldn't slide around. He bought one of these $600 furniture tools. And he's like, I treat that thing like gold. I said, why don't you put it in a backpack? That's what I do. He's like, oh no, I keep it where I can see it. It's okay, But I don't care how you take care of it, just take care of it. Buy good equipment, maintain that equipment, flush it. If your manufacturer says every 3 months you should flush an acid rinse through it. If you have a heating system, I'm telling you, if you have a heater on any machine, you should be running a filter from the incoming water, because any minerals and everything you run into that heated system will build up on those heating elements. You want to make your equipment last way longer? Put a filter in line before you put the water into your machine. You won't have the mineral build up on your heat exchangers. You won't have it building up in your equipment, in your pump heads, everything else. Your equipment will last longer, you'll have better heat, and you'll be a happy camper. Take care of your equipment, it'll take care of you. Take the time to do the upholstery, to identify the type of fiber, to burn every piece and see what you need. Take the time to do your bleed test, because the first time you don't do that bleed test and it bleeds all over, you just bought it. Because most customers are not going to say, oh, I like that new rainbow look on my upholstery. They're going to say, when are you buying me new? And the reality is, people think, oh, it's a $2,500 sofa. Well, that's not $2,500 if you did that much this week, okay? It's $2,500 of your net dollars. So you may work a month to make $2,500 net. So there's a big difference in that amount of money. So it's huge.
And if they got a love seat and they don't make that fabric,
Then you're replacing more than one piece. They could have a sofa, love seat, and chair combo with a chase and everything. You could be buying 4 or 5 pieces. You could have a lawsuit. You could have all kinds of problems. It's a few minutes to do the test, and it's really only a few minutes putting that product on 3 spots and clipping it onto that fabric, because then you're going to bring your hoses, your equipment, your vacuuming and everything else. So you're only involving a couple of minutes in the actual test. So it's stupid not to do it. And I'm only trying to help. Now, my name is Tom Cermak again, and I'm Thomas at trainemta.com. I have business cards. I give free advice, okay? Take pictures. Hey, Tom, I went and looked at this sofa today. I'm not sure what to do. Call me up. Don't say, hey, I saw this sofa today. What do I do? With no pictures, no fiber ID test, no nothing. Say, Tom, I saw this sofa. I took pictures of it. Here they are. I burned it. I got a natural and a synthetic, and I was concerned as to what to use. The more information you give me, the more I can help you. I help people for free every day. I've been doing this 45 years. I believe in paying. He'll tell you. He's been in my classes. Many of you people know me. This is not just a sales gimmick, because you know what I'm selling? Nothing. Okay, I don't have any part in KleenRite or anything else that asks me to come and talk about upholstery. I want to help you. If you call the manufacturers here, they have over 50 years in the upholstery business and carpet cleaning, but they started as more upholstery than carpet even. And I'm telling you, they will help you. They'll say, hey, look, use this product. do this, do this. If they can't help you or it's Saturday, Sunday, their office is closed, send me an email, holler at me. I will help you. I want you to be successful. I don't want you to have to buy Mrs. Smith a new sofa. I'd rather you take that money and spend it on your significant other, your children's education, or whatever is really going to benefit you as a human being. I guess that's it for now. I think I've talked your ears off. If you guys have any questions, you can always holler at me.